I'm of the opinion that your car should be second to your. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Today, we're going to be talking about modifications on your car. I am of the opinion, and a lot of things I'm going to share in this video are my opinions. So you can have a different opinion, and we can talk about it in the comment section. Please feel free to comment below, and then we'll have a chat about it. I'm of the opinion that your car should be second to your skills. A lot of people come into the sport of off-roading, and what they tend to do is they tend to spend heaps of money on their car, hoping that their car is going to compensate for their lack of skill, which will not happen. The more you spend on your car and the better the performance gets of the car, you actually require more and more skill to utilize your car. First thing, uh, enhance your skill before you enhance your car. Try and drive your car as stock as possible for as long as you can. When you feel like your skill is being compromised because of your car, that's when you start modifying your car. And the essential bits that you would first modify is a skid plate, because you need protection, especially if you have an IFS like in the Prado or the FJ. You need protection for your radiator. You need a kill switch, because these Toyotas are notorious for kicking in the traction control when you least want it in the sand. And you need a flag mount so that the car behind you can see you when you are behind a dune, or and so on. So we're going to have a separate video for these three things. These are the essential modifications that you have to do straight from the get-go. But we're doing this series about performance modifications. So today we're going to cover suspension. And suspension is such a broad category, and it's really, you can talk about it for hours. So we're going to cover very small bits in it, and if you have any questions, we are going to elaborate on whatever topics that you want. First thing, how do you know your suspension is set up right? If your car, I have this is something that I've been noticing for the past couple of months, especially since I've started focusing on suspensions, is a lot of people have somewhat of a bounce in the front. So when you come off from an obstacle, you come down or you come up, whatever when the compression happens, you see that your car does at least 2 or 3 bounces, or let's say even a single bounce is not really ideal. What you want is, how you would tell your suspension is set up right, is if you look at the trophy trucks. When the trophy trucks land, they just come up once and that's it. So it's like a fluid motion that happens because of the suspension, and that's kind of a very good or an easy way to tell you that your suspension is set up right. If your suspension is bouncing, the most common thing that is probably what's causing it is the preload setting is set a bit high, and it's wrong, because what tends to happen is when people are modifying the suspension, they're talking about how much lift you have, or how much clearance you get. These are questions which are actually unnecessary when you're modifying your suspension, because they're just for the looks. You modify your suspension for the performance. If you want your car just to look lifted, have big tires, go to the mall. This video is not for you. I'm actually talking about performance modifications for off-roading. So if you're interested in that, what you need to consider is how much wheel travel you have. So again, going back to trophy trucks, if you look at the trophy trucks, they sit pretty much with very minimal clearance. So their tires and their like this clearance in the trophy trucks is barely anything. But when their wheel actually droops, it goes down a lot. That's what really counts in off-roading. It doesn't matter how high your car sits. And a lot of garages might tell you, oh, look, we can make your car go 3-inch left and whatever. And really, that's not going to help you, because if they set the preload too high, your spring is going to be very compressed. So if you come here and you look at like this setting, This is your preload setting, and as you twist it to increase the height of the car, the spring keeps getting compressed. So obviously the spring's job is to have this movement, and if you compress it too much, then that movement is limited, and that's when you get the bounce. This is a very common way that you could have that bounce. Obviously there are multiple other ways that you can have that bounce, but this is the probably the most common in my experience. Second thing is, how do you pick what suspension, what kind of shock absorbers do you want? A lot of people just go for the 2.0. So obviously when you go to garages, they might tell you that you have the option of 2.0, 2.5, 3, and so on. This is, they're talking about the diameter of the shock, right, which dictates how thick your shock shaft can be and how much oil and nitrogen the shock body can hold. Obviously you have the twin tube and the monotube. The twin tube is, I would say, it's good. It does the job pretty well. This is your stage one. That's where basically the suspensions start. But it's more for overlanding than what we do with performance off-roading here. Monotube, again 2.0, it's good, but it heats up pretty fast because you have very little oil and very little uh, nitrogen in the monotube 2.0, because it's a very thin shock. 2.5 is a good place to start, I would say. In my opinion, it's expensive, but 2.5 is a pretty good place to start. And if you want to do, let's say, 45 minutes of off-roading, I would say you need a reservoir as well. This is Nick's car. This has a dual suspension. So I also installed a dual suspension about 6 months back, and I was always of the opinion that it's an overkill. Once I installed it, I understood that there is actually a massive difference in performance, because suddenly those small ditches, bushes, just basically when you're not paying 100% attention and you make a small error, or let's say you are driving at a decent speed because the convoy is driving at a decent speed, and or because the terrain kind of demands it. Because let's be honest, when you're in Al Khua, for example, there are climbs that you can't slow down. You just have to maintain at least 60 to 80 kilometers per hour to make that climb. If you're driving at 60 to 80 kilometers per hour and you hit even a small ditch, and you're running a single suspension, single shock in the front, it feels quite a lot and you lose a lot of momentum there. If you have the dual suspension setup, that literally doesn't feel like anything. You literally float over it, and it's not something that I can convincingly describe to you right now unless you feel it. But when you feel it, you can never go back to a single shock, because but that's kind of true with everything, I would say. When you do an upgrade, then you get stuck to that upgrade, then you can only go further, you can't go backward. Anyways, we'll talk about all of this in detail. um, whatever you find interesting, please put down your comments below, and we're gonna pick that topic up. Here I'm just covering uh, just the basics. So earlier I talked about the reservoir. So what does the reservoir do? Reservoir is an additional capsule which holds extra fluid that allows the shock to retain the correct temperature. Because what happens is, so obviously let's cover also why is it bad when the shock heats up. So when the shock heats up, the viscosity of the oil inside obviously drops, just like with every oil of this sort. And when the viscosity drops, it the the shock dampening is affected to a point where at one point your shock is going to stop working and you will just be running your coils. And that's when you feel like everything, there's no absorption, there's just a bounce. That's basically when your shock has stopped working. Having a reservoir allows you to retain the correct temperature in your shock for a long period of time. especially if you have a reservoir which has like these kind of fins. So if you look, there are fins across. This enables faster heat dissipation from the shock. So this is the front dual shocks setup. Again, let me be very clear. I always tell people, first enhance your skill, then enhance your car. You should be able to drive a stock car pretty much in any terrain, do any obstacle. You don't need these. This is my opinion. I strongly believe you don't need a suspension upgrade to do a lot of things, but at the same time, a suspension upgrade makes it more fun and makes it better for your car. Because if you're running a stock suspension, what's going to happen is every major bump on your car is going to be transferred to your body panel. So that's why you see if you look at any off-roader's car, none of the body panels are going to be aligned. And if you do a good suspension on your car, you can delay the misalignment. You can't avoid it, but you can delay. Also, you can save a lot of other things like hinges of your door and things like that. In the back, what you can do is you can have a 2.5 with a reservoir, and that's going to be sufficient because the primary weight of the car is in the front with the engine and the transmission. So this is where you need the dual suspension. I wouldn't say you need a dual. Anybody does a dual suspension in the back anyway. However, I figured out this new thing. Obviously, like when you start modifying your car, there are new things that keep coming up, and then you keep on doing it. You keep on to do that. If you add a hydraulic bump stop, which has got a 3-inch travel in the back, as soon as you get 15 to 20% compression on your primary shock, the hydraulic bump stop kicks in, which acts as a secondary shock. Now, this is something new for me, and I can't wait to do it on my car. So once I do it on my car, I will let you know how that feels. You also have long travel suspension kits. This is actually not a long travel suspension kit. So it's a dual suspension kit, but it's a not long travel suspension. Long travel will give you an additional 2 inches, 2.5 inches of travel. Obviously, like we said, travel is what you're really after when you're doing a suspension upgrade, because it will give you more traction, it will make the ride more comfortable, and it will also protect your car through and through. That's basically what I wanted to cover. Thanks for tuning in as always. If you agree with any of my comments, or you disagree, especially if you disagree with some of my comments, please put them down in the comments below, and I would love to hear from you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Please subscribe and like this video. It really helps us out.